Dr. Emma Rodriguez pressed her face against the small window of the transport ship. Below her stretched Kepler Station, a massive ring of metal and glass floating in the dark of space. This would be her home for the next 2 years. She had trained for this moment her whole life, but now that it was here, her hands shook just a little. The docking bay doors opened with a loud clang. Emma grabbed her 2 bags and stepped onto the station. The air tasted different here, recycled and clean, but somehow empty. Jake Mitchell, the station commander, waited for her at the airlock. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. "Dr. Rodriguez," he said, shaking her hand. "Welcome to Kepler Station. I hope you're ready for this." Emma nodded. "I've read all the files. I know what we're dealing with." Jake led her through the corridors. The station was bigger than she had expected. Long hallways stretched in every direction, with rooms and labs branching off like the spokes of a wheel. The floors were smooth metal that reflected the ceiling lights. "The Thakari arrived 3 days ago," Jake said as they walked. "We've had 2 meetings so far. They're polite, but they don't trust us yet. Can't say I blame them." Emma had studied the Thakari for months before coming here. They were predators from a world where only the strong survived. They stood 7 feet tall on powerful legs, with long arms that ended in razor-sharp claws. Their faces looked like a mix between a big cat and an ancient Earth dinosaur. Yellow eyes that missed nothing. Teeth that could bite through steel. "How many are there?" Emma asked. "5 total. Commander Vextar leads their group. His mate is called Zalneth. Then there are 3 cubs, Kip, Yara, and Nox. The cubs are young, maybe the same age as human teenagers." They stopped at a door marked with Emma's name. Jake pressed his hand to a scanner, and the door slid open. Inside was a small but comfortable room with a bed, a desk, and a wall screen for communication. A second door led to a private bathroom. "Your lab is 3 levels down," Jake said. "The Thakari quarters are right across the hall from you. I thought you might want to observe them when you're not working." Emma looked across the hallway. Another door, exactly like hers but marked with strange symbols instead of letters. "Are they dangerous?" Jake was quiet for a moment. "Their claws can cut through our strongest metal. They can run faster than our best athletes. Their teeth can crush bone. But they follow rules. They have honor. As long as we don't threaten them, they won't hurt us." "What about the cubs?" "That's the interesting part," Jake said. "Adult Thakari are trained killers from birth. But cubs are different. They're curious. They play, sort of. Not like human children, but they explore and learn. The parents watch them every second, though. Thakari culture says showing weakness is the worst shame possible." Emma unpacked her bags while Jake explained the daily routine. Meals were served in the main dining hall, but the Thakari ate separately. Humans and Thakari had different meeting times to avoid conflicts. The whole point of Kepler Station was to learn about each other slowly, carefully. That evening, Emma ate dinner alone in the dining hall. Through the large windows, she could see stars scattered across black space. Earth was somewhere out there, but too far away to see. She felt very alone. As she walked back to her room, she heard sounds from across the hall. Clicking noises, like someone tapping claws on metal. Then a deeper sound, almost like a cat purring but much louder. The Thakari were talking to each other. Emma pressed her ear to her door. She could hear 3 different voices. High-pitched clicks and chirps that must be the cubs, and deeper rumbling sounds from the adults. Sometimes one of the cubs would make a noise like laughter, but sharper and more wild. Over the next few days, Emma fell into a routine. She spent her mornings in the lab, studying samples of Thakari food and tools they had brought from their homeworld. The materials were strange and strong, made from substances that didn't exist on Earth. In the afternoons, she attended meetings with the Thakari delegation. These were formal affairs held in a large conference room. The humans sat on one side of a long table, the Thakari on the other. Commander Vextar was the most intimidating being Emma had ever seen. His yellow eyes seemed to look right through her. When he spoke, his voice was deep and rough, like gravel falling down a metal chute. He asked questions about human military strength, human territory, human weaknesses. Zalnith was quieter but no less frightening. She watched everything with the intense focus of a hunter. Her claws were longer than her mates, and she kept them sharp. Emma noticed that Zalneth never took her eyes off the human delegation, as if she expected an attack at any moment. The cubs were different. Kip was the oldest, almost as tall as an adult human. His scales were darker than his parents', and he tried to act serious and grown up. But sometimes Emma caught him staring at human objects with obvious curiosity. Yara was smaller and quicker. She had bright green markings along her arms that the adults didn't have. During meetings, she would fidget and look around the room, clearly bored by the adult talk. Nox was the youngest and smallest. He barely came up to Emma's shoulder, and his scales were lighter than the others. He had a habit of making quiet chirping sounds when he was thinking. The adult Thakari would give him sharp looks when he did this, and he would quickly go silent. Emma began to notice patterns in the family. The cubs stayed close to their parents during meetings, but in the hallways, they would spread out and explore. They moved with the natural grace of their species, but they also showed the curiosity of young minds. One morning, Emma saw the cubs in the hallway outside their room. They were examining the wall panels, tapping them with their claws and listening to the sounds they made. When they saw her, they quickly moved closer to their parents' door. Emma smiled and nodded at them. Nox tilted his head and made a soft chirping sound before his mother called him inside. These small moments gave Emma hope. The adult Thakari might be impossible to read, but the cubs were still learning about the world. They hadn't decided yet whether humans were enemies or friends. Maybe, Emma thought, that was where real understanding would begin. 3 weeks had passed since Emma arrived at Kepler Station. The meetings with the Thakari continued every day, but progress was slow. Both sides asked careful questions and gave careful answers. Nobody wanted to make a mistake that might ruin humanity's first real contact with another intelligent species. Emma had settled into her routine. Wake up, shower, grab breakfast, work in the lab until lunch, attend meetings, work more, eat dinner, and sleep. It was predictable and safe, but also lonely. She missed her family on Earth. She missed her friends. She even missed her noisy neighbors. The one bright spot in her days was watching the Thakari cubs. They were always doing something interesting. Yesterday, she had seen Kip trying to figure out how the automatic doors worked. He would walk up to them slowly, then jump back when they opened. After 10 minutes of this, he finally walked through with his head held high, like he had conquered a great enemy. Yara liked to race up and down the hallways. Her claws clicked on the metal floor as she ran. She was fast, faster than any human could ever be. But she was also careful never to go too far from her parents' door. Nox was the most curious of the three. Emma often caught him staring at human objects with his big yellow eyes. He would tilt his head this way and that, trying to understand what he was seeing. When other Thakari noticed him doing this, he would quickly look away and try to act tough. On this particular morning, Emma was running late for a meeting with the station's engineering team. She had spent too long in the lab studying a piece of Thakari metal that seemed to repair itself when damaged. Now she had to rush back to her room to change clothes and grab her notes. She pulled her dirty clothes out of the small cleaning unit in her bathroom and stuffed them into a bag. The station's main laundry was 3 levels down, and she could drop everything off on her way to the meeting. Emma hurried down the hall, her mind already on the questions she wanted to ask the engineers. She didn't notice that the bag wasn't closed properly. She didn't see her clothes starting to fall out behind her. By the time she realized what was happening, there was a trail of shirts, pants, and underwear scattered across the floor. Emma groaned and dropped to her knees to gather everything up. This was exactly the kind of thing that would make her late for an important meeting. Among the scattered clothes were 3 pairs of socks. Not ordinary socks, but thick, fuzzy ones that her grandmother had knitted for her before the long space journey. They were made from the softest wool Emma had ever felt, dyed in bright colors: blue, green, and yellow. Her grandmother had said they would keep her feet warm during the cold nights in space. Emma scooped up most of her clothes quickly, but she missed one of the socks. The blue one slipped under a wall panel and out of sight. She was too rushed to notice. The sock lay there in the quiet hallway after Emma left. The corridor was empty and silent, except for the soft hum of the station's air recycling system. An hour later, Knox emerged from his family's quarters. His parents and siblings were in another long meeting with the human leaders, discussing trade agreements and territorial boundaries. Knox found these meetings incredibly boring. All they did was talk and talk about things he didn't understand. He had permission to explore the area near their quarters, as long as he stayed within sight of their door. The adult Thakari had sensors that would alert them if he went too far. Knox padded down the hallway on his 4-clawed feet. His species walked differently than humans, lower to the ground, with their weight balanced differently. It made them incredibly fast and agile, but it also meant they experienced the world from a different angle. That's how Knox spotted the blue sock under the wall panel. His sharp eyes caught the bright color immediately. He approached carefully, the way his parents had taught him to investigate anything new. The sock was unlike anything in Thakari culture. It was soft where everything in his world was hard. It was thick where everything was thin. It was fuzzy where everything was smooth. Knox extended one claw and gently poked the sock. It gave way under the pressure, compressing and then bouncing back. This was strange. Metal didn't do that. Rock didn't do that. Even Thackeray's skin was much firmer than this weird blue thing. He picked it up with his claws, careful not to tear it. The material was incredibly light. He could barely feel its weight, but he could feel its texture, and that sensation was completely new to him. Thakari paws were designed for gripping and climbing. They were covered in tough scales that could handle any surface, from smooth metal to sharp rock. But those scales also meant that Thakari rarely experienced anything truly soft. Knox set the sock down and accidentally stepped on it with one paw. The feeling was amazing. His foot sank into the soft material, and for a moment he felt something he had never felt before: cushioning, comfort. He lifted his paw and stepped on the sock again. Then again. Each time the soft wool compressed under his weight and then slowly returned to its original shape. It was like stepping on a cloud if clouds were real things instead of just water vapor in the sky. Knox looked around to make sure no one was watching. His parents had strict rules about showing curiosity toward human objects. They said it made the family look weak, and weakness was shameful. But he couldn't help himself. He stepped on the sock with both front paws, then shifted his weight from side to side. The sensation was incredible. It was like his feet were being hugged by something warm and soft. That's when Emma came back. She had finished her meeting with the engineers and remembered the missing sock. She was walking slowly down the hallway, looking for any sign of the blue wool her grandmother had worked so hard to make. Emma stopped when she saw Knox. The young Thakari was standing on her sock with a look of pure wonder on his alien face. His yellow eyes were wide, and he was making soft chirping sounds under his breath. For a moment, neither of them moved. Emma had been taught not to startle the Thakari, especially the young ones. Sudden movements could trigger their hunting instincts. Knox had been taught to be wary of humans. His parents said they were weak and strange, but also possibly dangerous. But curiosity won out over caution. Knox tilted his head and made a questioning chirp. He lifted one paw off the sock and gestured toward it with his claw. Emma understood. He was asking what it was. She knelt down slowly, making herself smaller and less threatening. "That's a sock," she said quietly. "It goes on feet to keep them warm and comfortable." Knox didn't understand her words, but he understood her tone. She wasn't angry or scared. She was being gentle. Emma pointed to her own feet, then to the sock. She made walking motions with her fingers. Knox looked down at the blue thing under his paws, then back at Emma's feet. He chirped again, this time with what sounded almost like excitement. Emma smiled and reached into her pocket. She had been carrying the other 2 socks, planning to take them all to the laundry together. She pulled out the green one and held it up. Knox's eyes went even wider. There were more of these soft things. Emma put the green sock on her left foot, then took a small step forward. On the smooth metal floor of the station, she slid just a little bit. Knox made a sound that Emma had never heard before from a Thakari. It was almost like laughter, but wilder and more musical. He wanted to try. The next few days were different for Knox. He couldn't stop thinking about the soft blue thing and the strange feeling it had given his paws. During meals, he would stare off into space, remembering the sensation of cushioned steps. During family time, he would tap his claws quietly on the floor, wishing he could feel that softness again. His siblings noticed the change in him. Kip, the oldest, was the first to ask questions. "You act strange, little brother. What occupies your mind?" Knox wanted to tell them, but he wasn't sure how. "How do you describe soft to someone who has never felt it? How do you explain comfort to a species that values hardness and strength above all else?" "I discovered something in the human area," he finally said. "Something different." Yara's green markings brightened with interest. She was always ready for adventure. "Something dangerous?" "No," Knox said. "Something pleasant." This was a difficult concept for young Thakari to understand. Their culture taught them that pleasant things were usually traps. Soft things were weak. Comfortable things made you vulnerable. But Knox's obvious fascination was contagious. That night, after their parents had gone to another late meeting with the human diplomats, Kip made a decision. "Show us," he said. The three cubs crept out of their quarters and into the hallway. Knox led them to the spot where he had found the blue sock, but it wasn't there anymore. Emma had taken it back to her room. The cubs stood in the empty corridor, disappointed. Kip was about to scold Knox for wasting their time when Yara pointed with her claw. "There," she whispered. "Light comes from under that door." It was Emma's room. A thin line of light showed under the door, meaning someone was awake inside. The cubs looked at each other. They had been taught never to disturb humans in their private spaces, but curiosity was stronger than caution. Knox approached the door and made a soft chirping sound. Then he scratched very gently with one claw, the way Thakari cubs asked for attention from their parents. Inside her room, Emma was working on her daily report about Thakari behavior patterns. She heard the scratching and froze. The sound was too small to be an adult Thakari, too polite to be a threat. She opened the door slowly and found 3 pairs of yellow eyes staring up at her. The cubs stood in the hallway like children who had been caught sneaking cookies. Emma looked up and down the corridor. The adult Thakari were nowhere in sight. "Are you 3 supposed to be out here?" she asked quietly. The cubs didn't understand her words, but they understood her tone. She was asking if they were in trouble. Knox stepped forward and made the same questioning chirp he had used before. He pointed toward Emma's room with his claw. Emma realized what they wanted. "You want to see the socks again?" She stepped back and gestured for them to come inside. The cubs entered her small room carefully, looking around at everything with wide eyes. Human living spaces were so different from Thakari ones. Soft furniture, bright colors, pictures on the walls. Emma went to her closet and pulled out all 6 pairs of socks her grandmother had made. Blue, green, yellow, red, orange, and purple. She laid them on her bed like a rainbow. The cubs made excited chittering sounds. Yara reached out with one claw to touch the red sock, then pulled her paw back quickly when she felt how soft it was. "It's okay," Emma said. "They won't hurt you." She picked up the yellow sock and put it on her foot, then demonstrated sliding across the smooth floor of her room. The cubs watched in fascination as she glided from one wall to the other. Kip was the first to be brave enough to try. His paws were larger than human feet, but Emma helped him figure out how to get the sock to stay on. The fuzzy material stretched around his claws and scales. The moment Kip took a step, his eyes went wide. The sensation of softness against his paws was incredible, but that wasn't the amazing part. The amazing part was what happened when he tried to walk normally. His claws, which usually gripped the metal floor perfectly, couldn't get any traction through the thick wool. Instead of walking, he slid forward 3 feet before he could stop himself. Kip made a sound that was definitely laughter. Not the polite, controlled behavior his parents expected, but real, joyful laughter. Yara and Knox immediately wanted to try. Emma helped them put on socks, and soon all 3 cubs were sliding around her small room, bumping into furniture and each other, making happy chirping sounds. But the room was too small for real fun. Knox looked toward the door, then back at Emma. He pointed with his claw toward the long corridor outside. Emma understood. The hallway was much longer and completely straight, perfect for sliding. She looked at the cubs, who were staring at her with hopeful expressions. She thought about all the rules against unauthorized interaction with the Thakari. She thought about how angry Commander Vextar would be if he found out. Then she thought about the pure joy on their faces. "Okay," she said, "but we have to be quiet." Emma opened her door and checked the hallway. Empty. The cubs crept out, still wearing their colorful socks. The corridor stretched for almost 200 meters in each direction. Smooth metal floor reflecting the ceiling lights. Yara was the first to really go for it. She ran toward one end of the hallway, building up speed, then let her feet slide out from under her. She glided for 30 feet, her arms out for balance before coming to a stop near the far wall. The sound she made was pure delight. Kip and Knox followed her example, racing down the corridor and sliding as far as they could. Soon, all three cubs were taking turns, seeing who could slide the furthest or the fastest. Emma watched them play and felt something warm in her chest. This was what human children did. They found joy in simple things. They turned ordinary objects into games. They laughed for no reason except happiness. The Thakari cubs were doing the same thing, and it was beautiful. "Well, this is new," Emma spun around. Ben Collins, the station's maintenance chief, stood at the intersection of two corridors. He was a short, stocky man with grease-stained clothes and a tool belt around his waist. He worked the night shift, keeping the station's systems running while everyone else slept. Emma's heart stopped. If Ben reported this to Commander Mitchell, she would be in serious trouble. The cubs would probably be confined to their quarters for the rest of their stay. But Ben wasn't reaching for his communication device. He was watching the cubs slide down the hallway with a slow smile spreading across his face. "How long have they been doing this?" he asked. "Tonight is the first time," Emma said. "I can explain." Ben held up a hand to stop her. "No need. I can see exactly what's happening here." He paused as Knox slid past them, chirping with happiness. "Question is, are those socks going to hold up to this kind of use?" Emma blinked. "What?" "Those socks," Ben said, pointing at the cubs. "Wool's pretty tough, but Thakari claws are sharp. You're going to need something more durable if this becomes a regular thing." "You're not going to report us?" Ben laughed. "Report what? Some kids having fun? I got grandchildren back on Earth, Dr. Rodriguez. I know what happiness looks like." He watched Kip execute a perfect sliding turn at the end of the hallway. "Besides, this is the first time I've seen any of the Thakari look actually relaxed. Might be good for relations." Emma felt a wave of relief wash over her. "So you'll help us keep this quiet?" Ben nodded. "For now. But you might want to think about what happens when their parents find out. And they will find out. Eventually." Emma knew he was right, but as she watched the three cubs race and slide and laugh together, she decided that was a problem for tomorrow. Tonight was for joy. Commander Vextar was worried about his cubs. For the past week, their behavior had changed in ways he couldn't understand. They returned to their quarters each night exhausted, which was normal. Young Thakari needed lots of activity to develop properly. But they also seemed strangely content, which was not normal at all. Thakari cubs were supposed to be restless when confined to small spaces. They should pace and growl and complain about being stuck on this metal station instead of hunting on their homeworld. They should be demanding constant attention and challenging each other to dominance contests. Instead, his three cubs ate their meals quietly, answered questions politely, and went to sleep without the usual fighting and noise. Kip had even stopped trying to assert dominance over his younger siblings, something that should have continued until he was fully grown. Most strange of all, they seemed happy. Zalneth had noticed it too. "They whisper together when they think we cannot hear," she told her mate. "They make the soft sounds cubs make when they are pleased, but I do not know why they are pleased." Vexitar had tried asking them directly. "What occupies your minds, young ones? You act differently than before." But the cubs would just look at each other and claim nothing had changed. Knox, the youngest, would make his nervous chirping sounds and fidget with his claws. Kip would stand straighter and try to look serious. Yara would examine her feet as if they were the most interesting things in the universe. They were hiding something, and that made Vextar suspicious. In Thakari culture, secrets were dangerous. Hidden knowledge could mean the difference between life and death. Cubs who kept secrets from their parents often ended up as someone else's meal. The commander decided to investigate. The next night, after the usual diplomatic meetings with the humans, Vextar pretended to retire to his quarters with Zalneth. They turned off their lights and made the settling sounds that indicated they were going to sleep. But Vextar remained awake, listening. Sure enough, after about an hour, he heard his cubs moving around quietly. There were soft whispers, then the sound of their door opening very carefully. Vextar waited a few minutes, then followed them. His natural stealth abilities made him nearly invisible in the dim corridors. He moved without sound, staying far enough back that his cubs wouldn't detect his scent. Years of hunting had taught him patience. The cubs were heading toward the human section of the station. This immediately put Vextar on alert. What could they want in human territory? Were they planning some kind of attack? Had the humans somehow corrupted his young ones? He followed them to a corridor he had never explored before. The lighting was different here, brighter and warmer than in the Thakari sections. The cubs stopped outside one of the doors and made soft scratching sounds. The door opened, and the human female emerged. Dr. Rodriguez, the one who studied alien biology. Vextar had met her in several meetings. She seemed harmless enough, small and quiet and always asking questions about Thakari food and culture. But now she was letting his cubs into her private quarters, and that was definitely not allowed. Vexitar crept closer, using the shadows to hide his large form. Through the partly open door, he could hear strange sounds from inside. His cubs were making noises he had never heard before, excited chirps and what almost sounded like laughter. After a few minutes, they emerged again. But something was wrong with their feet. They seemed to be wearing some kind of human covering, bright-colored things that made their paws look bulky and strange. Then Kip started running down the long corridor, and Vextar saw something that made his blood freeze. His eldest cub, his heir, and future leader of their clan, was sliding down the hallway like a helpless infant who hadn't learned to walk properly yet. Worse, he seemed to be doing it on purpose. Yara followed, then Nox, all three of them gliding across the smooth floor with their arms out for balance. They looked ridiculous. They looked weak. They looked happy. Vextar crouched in the shadows, watching his cubs play this strange game. Every instinct told him to stop them immediately. This behavior went against everything Thakari culture valued. Strength, grace, control, dignity. His cubs were abandoning all of it for this foolish sliding. But he couldn't look away from their faces. In all his years as a father, Vextar had never seen his cubs look so genuinely delighted. They raced and slid and laughed together without any of the usual competition or aggression. Kip helped Nox when the youngest cub stumbled. Yara cheered when her brothers made particularly good slides. They were playing together instead of fighting each other, and it was wonderful to watch. The realization hit Vextar like a physical blow. His cubs weren't just content. They were experiencing joy. Pure, simple happiness that had nothing to do with dominance or survival, or proving their strength. This was completely unknown in Thakari culture. Dr. Rodriguez stood at one end of the corridor, watching the cubs with the same expression Vextar imagined was on his own face. Wonder mixed with affection and a kind of protective care. She wasn't exploiting his cubs or making them weak. She was sharing something with them, something that had made them happier than they had ever been before. Vextar stepped out of the shadows. Emma saw the massive Thakari commander emerge from the darkness and felt her heart stop beating. She had been caught red-handed, corrupting his cubs with human influences. He would be furious. He would probably demand her removal from the station. But when she looked at his face, she didn't see anger. She saw confusion and something that might have been wonder. The cubs noticed their father at the same time Emma did. They skidded to a halt in the middle of the corridor, their sock-covered paws scrambling for traction on the smooth floor. All three of them looked terrified. "Father," Kip said, trying to sound dignified despite the bright orange socks on his feet. "We were just—" Vexitar raised one clawed hand for silence. He walked slowly down the corridor toward Emma, his yellow eyes never leaving her face. "What have you done to my cubs?" he asked. His voice was quiet, but Emma could hear the dangerous undertone. "I gave them socks," Emma said simply. "Socks?" Emma pointed to her own feet. "Foot coverings. We wear them for warmth and comfort." Comfort, Vextar repeated the word like it was foreign to him. Which, Emma realized, it probably was. "Your cubs discovered that socks are slippery on smooth floors," she continued. "They turned it into a game. I didn't teach them to do this. They figured it out themselves." Vextar looked at his cubs, who were still standing frozen in the middle of the hallway. "A game," he said. "Yes, humans play games for fun, for joy. Not to prove anything or win anything, just because it feels good to be happy." This was clearly a difficult concept for the Thakari commander to understand. He walked over to where Nox stood trembling and knelt down to examine the socks on his youngest cub's feet. "These soft things," he said. "They serve no survival purpose?" "Not directly," Emma admitted. "But happiness serves a purpose too. It helps humans be more creative, more cooperative, more willing to help each other." Vextar stood up slowly. "My cubs have been happier since they began this game. They argue less. They work together more." "Yes," Emma said. "Play teaches cooperation. It builds bonds between individuals. It makes communities stronger." The commander was quiet for a long moment, thinking about this. Finally, he looked at his cubs again. "Continue," he said. The three young Thakari looked at each other in amazement. Then Yara grinned, showing all her sharp teeth, and took off running down the hallway. Her joyful slide was the longest one yet. News of the sock sliding spread through Kepler Station faster than Emma had expected. Commander Mitchell was the first human leader to find out. Ben Collins told him during their morning maintenance briefing, explaining it as a positive development in human-Thakari relations. Mitchell's first reaction was concern about protocol violations, but when Ben described the cubs' obvious happiness, the commander decided to observe for himself. That night, Mitchell stood in the same shadows where Vextar had hidden, watching three alien cubs race and slide down the corridors with pure joy on their faces. Emma stood nearby, ready to explain or apologize, but Mitchell just nodded approvingly. "This is exactly the kind of breakthrough we hoped for when we built this station," he said quietly. "Real connection between our species, not just formal diplomacy." Lisa Park, the station's anthropologist, was fascinated by what she called spontaneous cultural adoption. She began documenting the changes in Thakari cub behavior, noting how the introduction of play had affected their development. Traditionally, Thakari cubs learn through competition and dominance displays, she explained to Emma. But these three are learning cooperation and joy. It's unprecedented in their species' recorded history. The sock sliding became an official part of the cultural exchange program. Every night after formal meetings ended, the cubs would meet Emma in the corridors for what everyone began calling sliding time. Ben Collins contributed by installing grip strips at the ends of the long hallways, giving the cubs a safe place to stop without crashing into walls. But the real breakthrough came when Commander Vextar asked Emma to teach him about other human concepts of comfort. "My cubs have changed since learning this game," he told her during a private meeting. "They are happier, but also stronger as a family unit. If there are other human practices that could benefit my people, I wish to know them." Emma started slowly. She introduced the concept of pillows, soft things to rest your head on while sleeping. The adult Thakari were skeptical at first. Their culture valued sleeping on hard surfaces that kept warriors alert and ready for danger. But when the cubs tried the pillows, they slept more deeply and woke up more refreshed. Zalnath, Vextar's mate, privately admitted to Emma that she had never seen her young ones so peaceful at rest. Next came stuffed animals, soft toys designed purely for comfort and companionship. This was an even stranger concept for the Thakari. Why would anyone want a fake animal that couldn't fight or hunt or protect them? Knox provided the answer. He adopted a soft brown bear that Emma had in her personal belongings, carrying it with him everywhere and talking to it in quiet chirps when he thought no one was listening. The toy gave him confidence during difficult moments and comfort when he was scared or lonely. Seeing this, Kip and Yara requested their own comfort objects. Soon, all three cubs had stuffed animals that they treasured as much as any weapon or tool. The changes in the cubs began affecting the adults as well. Vextar noticed that his family argued less and cooperated more. The constant tension that had always existed in Thackeray households, the struggle for dominance and status, relaxed into something more peaceful. Perhaps, he said to his mate one evening, strength does not always require hardness. Word of the developments on Kepler Station eventually reached both governments. Earth's diplomatic corps was thrilled by reports of successful cultural exchange. The Thackeray High Council was more cautious, but they couldn't argue with the positive results. 6 months after Emma first dropped her laundry in the corridor, both species agreed to hold a formal ceremony celebrating the success of the exchange program. The ceremony took place in Kepler Station's largest meeting hall. Human and Thackeray officials sat together at long tables, something that would have been impossible when the station first opened. The cubs wore their best formal gear, but Emma noticed they had hidden socks underneath their ceremonial foot covers. Admiral Sarah Hayes represented Earth's government. Her counterpart was War Leader Krextal, the most senior Thackeray military commander. Both had come expecting to sign standard diplomatic agreements about trade and territory. Instead, they found themselves watching something unprecedented. The three cubs performed their sliding demonstration for the assembled dignitaries. They had perfected their technique over months of practice, turning simple sliding into an art form. They could slide in formation, execute perfect turns, and even do tricks like sliding while carrying objects or sliding backwards. But the most impressive thing was their obvious joy. As they raced and slid down the long corridor, their happy chirps and laughter echoed through the station. Human and Thackeray adults alike watched with amazement. In 6 months, Commander Mitchell explained to the gathered officials, these cubs have learned cooperation, creativity, and the value of happiness. They've also taught us that cultural exchange works best when it happens naturally, through curiosity and friendship, rather than formal programs. Admiral Hayes nodded approvingly. This is exactly the kind of relationship we hope to build with our neighbors in space. War Leader Krextal was more thoughtful. These cubs represent the first generation of Thackeray to learn joy as a strength, rather than a weakness. Their influence will spread to others of their age group, and eventually throughout our culture. After the demonstration, both governments agreed to expand the exchange program. More stations would be built, allowing for extended contact between human and Thackeray families. But most importantly, they agreed to share what Emma had accidentally started with the socks. Within a year, packages of Earth socks were being shipped to the Thackeray homeworld. Not as trade goods or diplomatic gifts, but as toys for Thackeray cubs. Along with them went instructions for other human comfort items: pillows, blankets, soft toys, and games designed purely for fun. The response was incredible. Young Thackeray across their empire began experiencing play and comfort for the first time in their species' history. Parents reported that cubs who played with soft things were calmer, more creative, and more cooperative with their siblings. Human child development experts were invited to Thackeray worlds to teach about the role of play in healthy growth. In return, Thackeray warriors shared their knowledge of discipline and focus with human communities. The cultural exchange went far beyond what anyone had imagined possible. Emma received regular reports about the program's expansion, but the news that made her happiest came from Kepler Station itself. More Thackeray families were requesting assignment to the station, specifically asking for quarters near the long corridors where their cubs could learn to play. She often found herself standing in the hallway where it all began, watching new groups of young Thackeray discover the joy of sock sliding. Each time, she thought about her grandmother's words when she packed those socks. These will keep you warm during the cold nights in space. Her grandmother had been right, but not in the way she had expected. The socks hadn't just kept Emma's feet warm. They had warmed the hearts of an entire species, creating bridges between worlds through something as simple as the desire to play and be happy. The corridors of Kepler Station echoed with the sounds of sliding socks and alien laughter, proof that sometimes the most important discoveries happen by accident. And sometimes the best way to make contact with another species is to let their children teach them how to have fun. Emma smiled as she watched the newest group of cubs race down the hallway, their colorful socks bright against the metal floor. This was what her grandmother would have wanted, her knitting bringing joy to beings she could never have imagined, on worlds she would never see. The future of human-Thackeray relations was sliding smoothly ahead, one sock at a time.